The ice storms of Europa howled against the reinforced walls of Research Station Omega-7. But Marcus barely noticed anymore. After 18 months of isolation, the constant winds had become white noise. A lullaby that marked the endless passage of time on Jupiter's frozen moon. He sat at his workstation, monitoring atmospheric readings that would be transmitted to Earth in 6-hour intervals. Though he wondered if anyone still cared about the data he collected, the communication. Blackout had lasted 43 days now. No explanations, no emergency protocols activated, just silence from the home office. Marcus had followed every troubleshooting procedure in the manual twice over, but the quantum relay remained stubbornly dead. He was completely alone, or so he believed until the visitors started coming. It began on the 44th night of silence. Marcus was reviewing geological surveys when the lights flickered in a pattern he'd never seen before. The main door's security locks disengaged with a soft hiss, and the airlock cycled without any input from him. His heart raced as he grabbed the emergency beacon, but his training kicked in. The previous station operator, Dr. Helena Voss, had left behind a sealed envelope marked Emergency Protocol 7, open only if unexplained visitors arrive. Inside, her handwriting was rushed but clear. They come at night. Different beings, different purposes. Never resist. Never interfere. Observe and document only. Your life depends on compliance. Trust the process, even when it makes no sense. The first visitor emerged from the airlock like a shadow given form. Tall, ethereal, with skin that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. The being moved through his station with purpose, examining equipment, touching surfaces, but never acknowledging Marcus's presence. It stayed for exactly 2 hours before departing as silently as it had arrived. Night after night they came. Beings of impossible variety. Some gaseous, others crystalline. A few that seemed to exist partially in dimensions Marcus couldn't perceive. Each visitor was different, but their behavior remained consistent. Observe, examine, ignore the human completely. Marcus documented everything, filling digital logs with sketches and descriptions. The isolation was driving him to the edge of madness, but the visitors provided a strange comfort. He wasn't alone, even if he was invisible to them. Then, on the 67th night, she arrived. Unlike the others, this visitor didn't ignore him. She stood in the doorway of the airlock, and Marcus felt his breath catch. She appeared humanoid, but clearly wasn't human. Her skin had an opalescent quality, shifting between pale blue and silver depending on the angle of light. Her hair moved as if underwater, defying the station's artificial gravity. Most striking were her eyes, deep violet with flecks of gold that seemed to hold ancient wisdom. She wore flowing garments that resembled silk, but moved with their own ethereal rhythm. Delicate patterns covered her arms and neck. Not quite tattoos, but markings that pulsed gently with bioluminescent light. For the first time since the visits began, Marcus felt truly seen. She looked directly at him, tilted her head slightly, and something passed between them. Recognition, curiosity, perhaps even compassion. She didn't speak, but her presence filled the sterile station with warmth he hadn't felt in months. She moved through the space differently than the others, more careful, more aware of him. When she examined his personal belongings, photos of Earth, his collection of vintage music files, sketches he'd made of the European landscape, she did so with reverence, as if understanding their significance. As dawn approached and she prepared to leave, she paused at his workstation. With one graceful finger, she touched the surface of his tablet and left behind a symbol, a spiral intertwined with what looked like a constellation. Then she looked at him once more, and Marcus could swear he saw the hint of a smile before she disappeared into the airlock. That morning, Marcus stared at the symbol for hours, tracing it with his finger. For the first time since the communication blackout began, he felt something other than despair. He felt hope, perhaps something more dangerous, the beginning of connection with a being from beyond the stars. Forbidden connections. Symbol haunted Marcus's thoughts throughout the following day. He sketched it repeatedly, trying to decipher its meaning, rotating it, breaking it down into component parts. When evening approached, He found himself preparing for her return with an anticipation that surprised him. He cleaned the station more thoroughly than he had in weeks, even changed into his cleanest uniform. She came again, as he somehow knew she would. This time her examination of his quarters seemed more purposeful. She discovered his art supplies, charcoal pencils and sketch paper he'd brought from Earth for the long, lonely nights. Watching him intently, she picked up a pencil and began to draw. Her movements were fluid, confident. The image that emerged was unlike anything in Marcus's experience. Geometric patterns that seemed to pulse with life, organic curves that suggested both mathematical precision and natural growth. When she finished, she set the pencil down and looked at him. Expect, where Marcus understood. This was communication. He took another piece of paper and began to draw the view from his quarters, the ice plains of Europa stretching endlessly toward Jupiter's massive presence in the star-filled sky. His human perspective, his reality. She studied his drawing with intense focus, then added to it. Where he had drawn the flat horizon, she sketched layers suggesting depth, dimensions he couldn't perceive. Her additions transformed his simple landscape into something complex and beautiful. Night after night, their silent conversations continued. She would arrive as the chronometer struck midnight station time, and they would spend hours exchanging drawings, symbols, and ideas. Marcus began to understand fragments of her visual language. The spiral from that first night meant connection, or perhaps journey. A series of overlapping circles seemed to represent understanding, or harmony. He started leaving out small offerings. Earth foods from his emergency rations. Music playing softly from his personal device. Even flowers he'd grown in the station's tiny hydroponics bay. She would examine each gift with careful attention, sometimes touching them to her forehead in what seemed like a gesture of gratitude or blessing. There, breakthrough came on the 15th night of their exchanges. Marcus had been struggling with a complex mathematical problem related to Europa's orbital mechanics when she arrived. Seeing his frustration, she approached his workstation. Without hesitation, she began writing equations, but not in any notation he recognized. The symbols were elegant, flowing, yet when he applied them to his calculations, they worked perfectly. Their eyes met in that moment of shared understanding, and something shifted between them. The careful distance they had maintained dissolved. She reached out slowly, giving him time to pull away, and touched his hand. Her skin was warm, smoother than silk, and he felt a gentle vibration, like a purr or a heartbeat. Marcus didn't pull away. Instead, he turned his palm up, and she placed her hand in his. They sat like that for long moments, two beings from different worlds, sharing the most basic form of connection, touch. From that night forward, their relationship deepened beyond mere communication. She began to linger longer, sometimes until dawn painted the ice fields pink and gold. They would sit together, her head occasionally resting against his shoulder. While he played music from Earth, she seemed particularly drawn to classical pieces, Bach Debussy. Compositions that spoke of human emotion and longing. Marcus found himself sharing more personal aspects of his life. He showed her photographs of his family, told her stories about Earth, even though he wasn't sure how much she understood. In return, she began revealing aspects of herself. Through drawings, she showed him glimpses of her world, vast crystalline cities, beings of light dancing through aurora-filled skies, oceans of liquid starlight. The nights became the only time Marcus truly felt alive. During the day, he went through the motions of his duties, but his thoughts were always with her. He began calling her Nira in his mind, based on a sound she made when particularly pleased or content with their exchanges. Their connection transcended language and species. When she touched him now, it was with growing familiarity and affection. Her fingers would trace the lines of his face as if memorizing them. Sometimes she would press her forehead to his, and in those moments, Marcus felt as if their thoughts were almost touching. But with each passing night, Marcus was increasingly aware that he was breaking every protocol he'd ever learned about first contact situations. He was supposed to observe, document, remain objective. Instead, he was falling for a being whose name he didn't know, whose species remained a mystery. His very presence in his life violated everything he'd been taught about maintaining professional distance. Yet when she looked at him with those violet gold eyes, when her bioluminescent markings pulsed more brightly in his presence, when she made that soft, contented sound that had inspired her name, Marcus knew that some connections transcended all protocols. Some bonds were worth the risk of breaking every rule ever written. The night everything changed began like many others, with Nira's gentle arrival at midnight and the familiar warmth of her presence filling the cold station. But Marcus noticed something different in her manner, an urgency in her movements, brightness in her markings that pulsed faster than usual. She seemed almost agitated, if such human emotions could be applied to her alien nature, instead of their usual exchange of drawings and symbols. Nira went directly to Marcus's personal quarters. She gestured for him to follow, and when he did, she began creating the most complex visual story she had ever shared. Her drawings were frantic, passionate, showing scenes of her people, their world, and something that looked disturbingly like surveillance or study. Marcus watched, increasingly concerned, as she drew image after image of beings like herself, observing different species across various worlds. Then she drew something that made his blood run cold. Humans clearly recognizable, being watched just as he had been watched. But in her final drawings, she showed pairs from different species. Always one observer and one observed, coming together in what could only be described as intimate bonds. When she finished, Nira looked at Marcus with an expression that transcended species. It was vulnerability, fear, and desperate hope all combined. She reached for him then, not the gentle touches they had shared before, but with urgent need. Her hands cupped his face, and for the first time, she spoke in a voice like wind chimes and distant thunder. "Marcus," she said, his name sounding like music in her alien tongue. "I choose you. I choose this." Before he could respond, she pressed her lips to his in a kiss that was like nothing he had ever experienced. It was warm and electric, tasting of starlight and ozone. Her bioluminescent markings flared brighter, and Marcus felt a connection forming between them that went beyond physical, a merging of minds, emotions, and something deeper still. When they broke apart, Marcus was breathless. "Nira," he whispered, the name he had given her, and she smiled, the first truly human expression he had seen from her. "You named me," she said in accented but clear English. "My people. We study emotion, connection, love, but we had never felt it ourselves until I came here. Until I met you." Their conversation that night revealed everything. Nira's species, the Veilthara, were emotional archaeologists of sorts, sent throughout the galaxy to study the bonds that formed between different species. They were curious about love, about the connections that transcended biology and culture. But they had been purely academic observers until now. "I was not supposed to feel," Nira explained as they lay together on Marcus's narrow bunk, her head on his chest, her markings now pulsing in sync with his heartbeat. "I was supposed to observe, document, report. But you, ... double quotes. She traced patterns on his skin with her finger. You made me understand what I was studying." Marcus held her closer, marveling at how perfectly she fit against him despite their biological differences. "What happens when they find out?" Her markings dimmed slightly. "I do not know. No Veilthara has ever experienced what I feel for you. But I cannot go back to merely observing. I cannot pretend this connection does not exist." They made love that night with a passion born of forbidden longing and the knowledge that their time together might be limited. Nira's touch awakened sensations Marcus had never imagined possible. Her skin glowed brighter with arousal, and when they moved together, it felt like dancing among stars. Her alien nature made their intimacy exotic and wonderful. Her body temperature shifted with her emotions, cooling when she was content, warming when desire overtook her. Her hair moved with a life of its own, caressing his skin like silk tendrils. Most remarkably, when their passion peaked, her bioluminescent markings formed patterns that seemed to tell the story of their connection, spirals and stars and flowing designs that spoke of unity across impossible distances. In the quiet aftermath, As they held each other in the artificial dawn of the station's lighting system, Marcus realized that everything had changed. This was no longer about following protocols or maintaining professional distance. This was about love. Real, deep, transformative love that had bloomed between two beings who should never have met. "My people will come for me soon," Nira said softly. "They monitor all observers. When they discover what has happened, they will recall me. Then we'll face it together," Marcus replied, kissing the top of her head where her hair continued to move gently around them. "Whatever happens, we'll face it together." But even as he made that promise, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that forces beyond their control were already moving against them. Their love might be pure and real, but they existed in a universe where regulations, protocols, and the fears of two very different species would not easily accept what they had found in each other. Still, holding Nira in his arms, feeling the gentle pulse of her markings against his skin, Marcus knew that some things were worth fighting for. Some connections were worth any risk, any sacrifice. Their love had been born in the cold isolation of Europa, but it burned now with the heat of a star, and he would not let it be extinguished without a fight. The morning after their first night together brought an ominous change to the station's routine. Marcus's communication array, silent for months, suddenly crackled to life with an incoming transmission. The voice that emerged was crisp, authoritative, completely unexpected. "Research Station Omega-7. This is Director Harrison, Colonial Administration. Prepare for immediate extraction. A transport will arrive in 72 hours. Marcus stared at the communication panel in shock. After months of silence, suddenly they wanted to extract him with no explanation? The timing couldn't be coincidental. Somehow, somewhere, someone knew about Nira. When she arrived that night, Nira's markings were dimmer than usual, pulsing with what Marcus had learned to recognize as distress. Before he could tell her about the transmission, she spoke first. "They know," she said simply. "My people know, and you're suspect." She led him to their usual place by the observation window and began the most complex visual story she had ever shared. Through her drawings, she revealed the truth about the Veilthara's mission on Europa and dozens of other worlds. "We are not just observers," she explained, her voice heavy with implications Marcus was only beginning to understand. "We are scouts for a confederation of peaceful species. For centuries, we have been studying different races, looking for those capable of joining a galactic community based on cooperation and emotional connection rather than conquest." Her drawings showed vast networks of interconnected worlds, species working together, sharing knowledge and resources. But she also showed the careful selection process. Civilizations that passed the tests were welcomed. Those that failed were left alone to develop at their own pace. "The test?" Marcus asked, though he was beginning to suspect the answer. "Love," Nira said simply. "The ability to form genuine emotional bonds across species barriers. Most civilizations fail. They cannot see past physical differences, cannot connect on the deep level required for true cooperation. But some, double quotes, she touched his face gently. Some surprise us." Marcus felt a chill of understanding. "I was never alone on this station, was I? This was all arranged." Nira nodded sadly. "You were chosen, Marcus. Your psychological profile, your capacity for connection, your ability to see beyond surface differences. The communication blackout. The isolation, it was designed to create the perfect conditions for contact. The revelation should have angered him. But instead, Marcus felt a strange sense of completion. Everything made sense now. His selection for this isolated posting, Dr. Voss's mysterious protocols, even his own inexplicable calm when the visitors first arrived. But the test went wrong, Nira continued. "I was supposed to remain objective, simply observe your reactions. Instead, ... double quotes, her markings flared brighter. "I fell in love with you. I felt what I was studying, and that changes everything." She showed him more drawings, these depicting heated discussions among her people, emergency councils, debates about what to do with an observer who had become emotionally compromised. Some images suggested recall and memory modification. Others hinted at more drastic measures. They cannot allow a Veilthera to remain bonded to a subject species, she explained. It violates every protocol, compromises the objectivity of our mission. Marcus pulled her closer, feeling desperate determination rising within him. What about my people? The extraction team? They know something happened. Quantum fluctuations from our bonding process. Energy signatures that don't match human technology. They suspect first contact, but they don't understand what they're dealing with. Through the observation window, they could see the distant glow of Jupiter. Its great red spot a swirling reminder of the vast forces at play in their corner of the galaxy. Marcus realized they were caught between two bureaucracies, two species protocols, two sets of rules that had never anticipated love blooming in the cold spaces between worlds. There has to be a way, Marcus said, his voice fierce with conviction. What we have. It's real, Nira. It's exactly what your people are looking for, isn't it? Proof that connections can form across any barrier? Nira's markings pulsed with hope and fear in equal measure. Some of my people believe as you do. They think our bond could be the key to finally welcoming humanity into the Confederation. But others see it as contamination, a failure of scientific method. That night, they made love with the desperate passion of those who know their time is running out. Their physical connection had deepened beyond mere desire into something transcendent. When Nira's emotions peaked, her entire body became luminescent, and Marcus felt as if he was making love to living starlight. Their bond was no longer just emotional or physical, it had become something metaphysical. A joining that neither species had protocols for dealing with. Whatever happens, Marcus whispered as they lay entwined, I want you to know that meeting you was worth everything. Even if they take you away, even if they make me forget, this moment is worth a lifetime of ordinary experience. Nira traced glowing patterns on his chest, each touch leaving temporary trails of light. In my language, there is a concept of Alethnara. It means love that transcends form. It was always theoretical until now. As dawn approached, they knew their time of secrecy was ending. The extraction team would arrive soon, and with them would come questions, investigations, and protocols designed to handle everything except what they had actually found. Two hearts that had recognized each other across the vast darkness of space and refused to let distance, biology or bureaucracy, keep them apart. Their greatest test was yet to come. The transport ship arrived precisely when Director Harrison had promised, its sleek form cutting through Europa's thin atmosphere like a blade. Marcus watched from the observation deck as it settled onto the landing pad, knowing that within hours, everything would change forever. Beside him, Nira's markings pulsed with a rhythm that matched his own rapid heartbeat. They brought a full diplomatic team, Marcus observed. Noting the multiple figures emerging from the transport and environmental suits, this isn't just an extraction, Nira nodded gravely. My people are here too. I can sense them. Indeed, as if materializing from the ice itself. 3 Veilthera appeared near the landing site, their forms shimmering in the pale sunlight. Even at this distance, Marcus could see they moved with the same ethereal grace as Nira, but their markings pulsed with colors he had never seen on her, deeper purples, sharp silvers, patterns that spoke of authority and judgment. The door chime echoed through the station with unusual formality. Marcus squeezed Nira's hand once before moving to answer it. Knowing this might be the last moment they had alone together, Director Harrison was a stern woman in her 50s. Flanked by 2 xenobiologists and a military advisor, her expression was carefully neutral as she stepped into the station. But Marcus caught the moment her eyes widened slightly at seeing Nira. Mr. Chen, Harrison said formally, I believe we need to discuss what's been happening at this station. Before Marcus could respond, the Veilthara delegation entered through the Stilipin airlock without ceremony. Their presence filled the small space with a subtle harmonic vibration, and their markings cast shifting patterns of light on the walls. The lead Veilthera, whose markings identified her as someone of high rank, spoke in the same melodic voice as Nira, but with notes of authority that resonated through the station's air recycling system. I am Council Speaker, Adara, of the Veilthora Confederation. We have come to resolve a situation that threatens the protocols both our species depend upon. What followed was the strangest diplomatic meeting in human history. Marcus found himself at the center of discussions that spanned galactic politics, scientific methodology, and the nature of love itself. The humans wanted to understand the alien presence, the security implications, the potential for technological exchange. The Valthera were focused on containing what they saw as a contamination of their research protocols. Through it all, their hands joined despite the disapproving pulses from Thyra's markings and the concerned glances from Director Harrison. You must understand, Thyra addressed the human delegation. Observer Nira was sent to study your species' capacity for interspecies bonding. She was never intended to experience such bonding herself. This compromises not only our scientific methodology, but potentially our entire evaluation of humanity. Director Harrison leaned forward intently. Evaluation? For what purpose? The moment of truth had arrived. Thyra's markings shifted through a complex pattern that Marcus had learned meant reluctant acknowledgement. For potential membership in the Galactic Confederation, a peaceful alliance of species committed to cooperation rather than conquest. But such membership requires proof of emotional sophistication, the ability to form genuine connections across biological barriers. Then isn't this exactly what you're looking for? Marcus interjected, earning surprised looks from both delegations. Nira and I? What we found together. Isn't that proof that humans and Valthera can connect on the deepest level? One of the human xenobiologists, Dr. Reams, spoke up excitedly. He's right. This represents an unprecedented opportunity for interspecies relations research. But Thyra's markings darkened. It represents a compromised observer and tainted data. Observer Nira must be recalled and undergo memory restructuring. The human subject must also be processed to remove potentially dangerous knowledge. No, the word came from Marcus with surprising force. You can't erase what's real. What Nira and I have found isn't contamination or failure. It's exactly what you've been searching for across the galaxy. Nira stepped forward, her markings blazing brighter than Marcus had ever seen them. When she spoke, her voice carried harmonics that made the entire station resonate. Council Speaker. I formally request permission to remain with Marcus Chen as a cultural liaison between our species. Our bond demonstrates that the emotional connections necessary for Confederation membership are possible. To destroy this bond would be to destroy the very evidence you seek. The room fell, silent except for the gentle hum of life support systems. Marcus held his breath as Thyra and the other Valthera exchanged complex pattern communications that flickered too quickly for him to follow. Finally, Director Harrison broke the silence. What exactly would this liaison position entail? Thyra's markings shifted through what Marcus recognized as reluctant consideration. It would be ... unprecedented. No Valthera has ever remained permanently with a subject species. The implications for our protocols, our scientific objectivity, ... double quotes, maybe it's time to evolve beyond pure objectivity, Dr. Reams suggested. If the goal is understanding interspecies bonding, who better to guide that understanding than two beings who have actually achieved it? The negotiations continued for hours, with breaks for both delegations to consult with their respective authorities via quantum communication. During one such break, Marcus and Nira found themselves alone on the observation deck, watching Jupiter's storms swirl in the distance. Whatever happens, Marcus said, I don't regret any of it. Meeting you, loving you, it's changed everything about how I see the universe. Nira's markings pulsed with warm golds and gentle blues. You have changed me too, Marcus Chen. I came here to study love, but you taught me to feel it. No matter what the councils decide, that transformation cannot be undone. When the negotiations resumed, both sides had reached a decision. The Galactic Confederation would establish a formal first contact protocol with humanity, with Marcus and Nira serving as the initial liaison team. It was a compromise that satisfied neither bureaucracy completely, but offered something both sides wanted: a pathway toward greater understanding. Months later, as Marcus stood on the observation deck of the new Earth Confederation Embassy Station, Watching ships from a dozen different species dock at the facility he and Nira had helped design, he marveled at how much had changed. Their love story had become the foundation for humanity's introduction to galactic society. Nira appeared beside him. Her markings now permanently shifted to include warm golds that reminded him of Earth's sunlight. Having second thoughts about becoming the galaxy's most famous interspecies couple, she asked with the humor she had developed during their time together. Marcus pulled her close, still amazed by the perfect way she fit against him. Never, though I have to admit, I preferred it when it was just us against the universe. It is still us, Nira said softly, her markings pulsing in the pattern that had become their private language of love. It will always be us. We just have a larger audience now, as they watched the stars beyond the station's windows. Marcus reflected on how two lonely hearts had found each other in the cold reaches of space and somehow changed the course of history. Their love had begun as a violation of protocol, but it had become the bridge between worlds, proof that the most powerful force in the universe wasn't gravity or nuclear fusion, but the simple, miraculous ability of two souls to recognize and choose each other across any distance, any difference, any barrier the cosmos could devise. Their story was just beginning.